everyone! Today we are going to be learning how to embroider a simple rose. What you're going to need are some DMC embroidery floss, a 3-inch hoop, an embroidery needle, a chalk pencil, and a little scrap of linen fabric. You can use calico fabric or even cotton, but I like the thicker fabrics like linen. I'm going to place my hoop over the fabric and sketch out my circle for what size rose I want. You can do any size circle and use the same method. Now go ahead and sketch out your leaf. We're going to be also learning to do that leaf in this video. So now I have the perfect size. I'm going to unscrew my hoop, take out the center hoop, place it under the rose, and I'm going to line this up where the metal piece on top is right above where I want the rose to be. So position things exactly how you want with the metal piece right on top, not off to the side. Make sure that your rose is centered. We're not going to be taking this back off of the hoop later. So once you have it where you want it, go ahead and tug at that fabric and tighten down the twist up there. We're going to kind of pull on our fabric gently to make sure it's really taut. We want really tightly taut fabric here for our embroidery hoop, and then just go ahead and tighten down that screw as much as you can. So here, going ahead and starting, we're going to do our leaf first. So take about maybe 2 feet of embroidery floss, and we're going to separate the threads. Embroidery floss comes as 6 threads wound together, and I'm going to just be using 4 for this leaf. You could use all 6 if you really want to, but that's going to create a lot fuller leaf and a lot more volume off of the fabric, and I want my leaf to be pretty flat, so I'm just going to use 4 strands of the embroidery floss. Now the longer the thread is, the more this will get tangled, and I wound up cutting off a good portion of the tangled part. You can see here, so I wind up having maybe 1.5 feet of thread, again 4 strands. So go ahead and thread your embroidery needle. Any embroidery needle will work. I'm using a little bit larger one, not a super huge embroidery needle, but you can find these at the craft store along with all of your other supplies. Go ahead and tie a knot at the bottom of your thread. So just a simple knot there, and we're going to come up through the back of our fabric at the base of that leaf and then go up to the tip so that we have a nice line there as a guide. So what we're going to do to get started here, now that we have our center line, is we're going to come up through the back of the fabric right at the tip of the leaf. So right at the tip on one side, come up, and then about halfway down on the other side of the center line, come down through the front. And we're going to just keep alternating there, coming up through the top of the right and about halfway down through the left. And I'm just coming down in the middle, right next to that center line. And we're just going to follow the guide. We can see here on the back it's catching a little bit, so just undo that knot. Just follow the guide on those sides and then keep coming down just a little bit further and further down on the center line. So we're crossing over the center line here every time. If I'm coming up through the right, I'm coming down to the left, right to the left of the center line, and then I'm switching over to the left and coming down on the right side of the center line and alternating all the way down. So make sure that on the sides you're coming up through where that side is that we sketched out. You can make this leaf as wide or as narrow as you'd like. You can do all different shapes of leaves using this technique. And when we get here to the base of the leaf, go ahead and keep following your sketched lines. And it might get a little tight here where you're stitching down by the center line, but that's totally fine. These threads can overlap on top of each other. You just need to follow that guide all the way down. So now you can see here how my leaf is looking. I'm just going to turn this over and weave in that end. So I'm just going to kind of thread it under those stitches on the back a couple of times. And you can see here I had plenty of slack thread. I didn't run out on this leaf, so that was the perfect amount. Leaf is done. Now we're going to move on to the rose. You will not believe how easy this rose is. Go ahead and thread your needle. This amount of thread was not enough, but that's fine. You don't want to work with too much or it'll knot up on you a lot. So here, create a knot in the bottom of your thread and then come up through about the center of the circle, back down through the top, come up through the center, and back out around the corner. We're going to create a 5-pointed star here. So you can sketch this out with your pencil if you'd like to, but I'm just kind of eyeballing it and that works fine for me. So coming up through the center and then back down out by the edge of our circle that we sketched. So now I have 5 points. I'm going to come up through the center right near the corner, not in the corner, but right near the corner. And now I'm going to go over one thread and I'm going to go under the next. So I've gone over, I'm threading under, I'm going over and then under the next, over one, under the next, over one, and under the next. So you're just kind of skipping. And here I have another knot that's catched, so just go ahead and undo that. And we're just going to do this all the way around. So basically we're just going over, under, and continuing that. As long as you have a 5-pointed star, this will work out perfectly and you won't need to do anything special to get this to turn out just like a rose. So make sure that you are looking at where you last stitched and just go over, under. I've done several rounds of this and you can see here how it should be looking. I've just gone around and around and around. I haven't broken the thread. I haven't undone anything or done anything different. I just continued with this. And the way that I've gotten that volume is by not pulling the thread too tight. Every time I make a stitch and I go over, under, just don't pull it too tight. Just go ahead and let the thread kind of lie where it's going to, and that's totally fine. These knots are going to happen with your thread, and just kind of yank on it and it'll come undone. It's really just a loop, not a knot. So go ahead and just continue with the over, under, and you can see here that my thread, sometimes when the rose gets built up like this, and there are a lot of rounds going on, when you go to pull it down, the thread will try and lie on top of your other stitches or your other pieces of thread, and you don't want that. You want it to kind of lie around the outside. So just go ahead and make sure that it's lying around the outside, and if you need to kind of loosen up that stitch and then redo it or kind of move it to the side of the rose and then place it back down, that's totally fine too. That will help create the volume and the lift off of the fabric. You don't want a completely flat rose. And here you can see as we go on and on and on, eventually it'll get to the point where it's hard to see those that 5-pointed star that we stitched, and it's difficult to see where we're stitching. And when you get to a point where you really can't stitch into that 5-pointed star anymore, it's time to finish off. But you do want to keep going until it's hard to see and hard to stitch into that 5-pointed star. If you can still see it well enough or you can still stitch into it well enough, then it's probably not gone far enough. So now I've just inserted my needle from the front to the back and kind of hit it under the rose. I've come up through the center and I'm just going to do a French knot here in the center to hide the very center of that 5-pointed star. If you need help on a French knot tutorial, there are tons of great ones on YouTube. Just search embroidery French knot. And I've gone ahead and just weaved in my end here on the back, and my embroidered rose is done. Now I'm just going to finish this off by cutting around the edge. So just with some really sharp scissors, cut around the edge. Don't cut it too close because we're going to finish this off by folding it down, and we're going to glue it down here on the back. So leave enough slack, get it as even as you can all the way around when it's trimmed down. Now here I have my hot glue gun, and I'm just going to do a line of glue right there on the edge of the wood, not on the inside of the wooden hoop because we don't want this to leak onto our embroidered fabric. And we're just going to press this down. Make sure to be very careful if your hot glue gun is a high temperature one. You don't want to burn your hands with the glue, so just put it right there on the wooden hoop and then press your fabric down. You should have enough kind of slack glue to press it down onto the inside of the hoop as well if you need to. And that is how I embroider a rose, nice and easy. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe.